Okay, can you hear me well? That's fine, perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much. I think that we can start with the presentation. We can, yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. I'm very happy for that. And first of all, let me say thank you to our guests, Ellas, Karen, Pam, and Tania. And I would also like to thank those who helped me with the organization of this symposium. That was quite complicated. So a super thank you to Giulia Mura, that maybe you already know, and also Michela Rota, Sebastian, Ginevra Addis, Alessandra Terenzi, and Elisa Pigozzi for helping me in doing this event. That have a very particular organization, as you can see by the program. Okay, let's get started right away because we have a very full day ahead of us and we are on a tight schedule. So I will take just 10 minutes to briefly introduce the context in which this initiative fit. Do you have the mark? Okay. Which we have called a symposium because its goal. Okay, no, that's fine. Because its goal is not only to open up a discussion about this topic, but also to propose actions. Sorry. Yeah, it's bad. Okay. To propose action that will help make progress in bringing the gap between theory and practice, especially in the fields of biodiversity, conservation, and food system sustainability. As you know, this symposium is one of the results of the National Biodiversity Future Center project that was funded by the Ministry of University and Research through the European Union funds. The center was established in Italy, and it is a coordinating structure involving more than 2,000 stakeholders. The center is organized in different thematic spokes. Some are focused on sea biodiversity, other on land biodiversity, other on urban and health. And the last two spokes are a transversal spoke that aim to transform research into value for society. Our activity is part of the spoke 7. So, sorry. No, per andare indietro, scusami.
Poi tastiera?
Più facile? No, non ti preoccupare. Okay, the main task of the Spoke 7 is to communicate and enhance with the international audience and Italian society the contents that will emerge from the other 6 thematic spoke. And definitely we want to create an effective operational interface to connect the world of biodiversity research with the policymakers, ministries, and all other relevant public and private institutions and stakeholders. In particular, inside the Spoke 7, we are a group of sociologists centered in the UNIMIB University, and we are working on a different line of research. In particular, we are investigating the relationship among museums, ecomuseums, food and biodiversities. We are analyzing the cultural institution role in the conservation and in the enhancement of biodiversity. We are also working in Africa, in particular in the North Africa, where we are trying to identify some interesting case studies from the point of view of biodiversity, food, and community engagement. So on this point, we are working in Tanzania, Algeria, and Morocco. We are also trying to design new educational pathways in the field of museums, biodiversity, and food. There are another group that is working to identify best practice in urban policies for ecological transition, biodiversity, and sustainability in the cities. The last two are to develop the new proposal project in the field of biodiversity-funded art and in analyzing the environmental discourse in popular culture. We have already published some papers. We have just showing the list of papers that are already published, and we are working on other papers that are under evaluation. In general, we can say that the action of Spoke 7 are driven by a belief that is also the starting point of this symposium, and it is that there can be no ecological transition without a societal commitment to genuine ecology. This is the starting point for this symposium and for all the activities of our group. And in order to stimulate this societal commitment, it's important for us to define a set of actions, a set of practices that significantly contribute to build a discourse or a way of thinking aimed at raising awareness among people about the value of biodiversity conservation and promoting the sustainability of the food system. So the main topic we wanted to discuss today regards what condition and which practices underline the development of what Bourdieu called habitus that enable people to protect and enhance their environment. In other words, the goal of this symposium is to reflect on what hinders or slows down societal commitment. What the main challenges are to make societal commitment real. Most importantly, it is essential for us to think about and plan real action that can help strengthen this societal commitment on these issues. So with this meeting, we want to discuss what cultural institutions, in particular museums and eco-museums, can do to raise public awareness and promote participatory practices on the issue of biodiversity conservation and the sustainability of the food system. So the day will begin with 4 talks from our guests that I already introduced, and with their talk, we wanted to introduce experience and reflection in the field of food, biodiversity, museum, education, and community engagement. I will continue with the organization of 3 parallel discussion tables, which will reconvene in the final working session to develop a shared document. The 3 parallel discussion tables will be organized around 3 issues, as you know, because we shared the position paper. The first one is about how to fill the gap between theory and practices. And the question we want to discuss are how can cultural institutions such as museums and eco-museums contribute to reduce the gap between theory and practices in the field of biodiversity conservation and sustainable food system. And another point that is important for us is what can we do to involve different age groups and to maximize the impact on young people. The second one is about the experiences that the cultural institutions from around the world are promoting in the field of food and biodiversity. And the question that need answers are, how can museums and eco-museums share experience? Which action can be implemented to increase the diffusion of initiative and to facilitate a more coherent and organic production of knowledge? The last one is about how the impact of these practices can be evaluated. And we are looking for answers to this question, which are the most important elements to consider in the practices of evaluation, what do successful experiences have in common, and what are the most frequently encountered obstacles. It's important for me to clarify that these 3 issues are closely interconnected. More specifically, the second and the third ones help to explore the first one, which remain the central issue we are reflecting on during this meeting. In other words, the theme of the symposium concerns how cultural institutions can help to reduce the gap between theory and practices in the field of biodiversity conservation and food system sustainability through educational projects, and the focus on practices and evaluation process help to explore this central issue. This is why we decided to organize 3 discussion tables that address all the three questions identified, asking a participant to contribute to the overall theme by offering reflections on either, so action they have direct or indirect experience with, and or the evaluation strategy that they have already implemented. So the table are organized as follows. Okay, you already have information about the organization of each table, so you know where you are, and I won't go into more details about this table. Instead, it's very important for me to remember that during the first round of discussion, the participants will have 4 minutes each to present themselves and their institutions, and then other 4 minutes to discuss some critical point on at least one of the topics defined before. In the second round of discussion, you will have 4 minutes to propose action, and then 45 minutes to work all together on the development of a summary document. As you know, in every table there is a coordinator and a secretariat that help in the definition of the document. The final document that you are going to prepare will be organized in 2 sections, and it will be no longer than 3 pages. The first part is about the symposium themes and open issue, highlighting for each topic the state of art and the critical issues. The second part is a proposal for actions, once again focusing on the 3 issues and suggesting a way to tackle them. In other words, we wanted to collect proposal of action and how to implement them, identify methods, action, and tools. Then, in a couple of weeks, we will produce 1 document that to put together all the 3 tables results. So this is my last presentation. I'm perfectly in time, I think. So I wish all of you have a very fruitful day of work. And now I let the stage to our first guest, that is Pamela. Okay. Bye. Okay. Pamela works in the University of the Columbia University of New York, sorry, and she's an expert of nutrition and education. Okay, yes, it's fine.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and I am delighted to be here. And I think what I'm going to say will build really nicely on what Nunzia just talked about, and I know my slides are coming up now. My goal is to think about how do we do this in terms of education and promotion. So, okay, now it's going to be shown. Yep. Okay. Okay, so I'll just start talking while it's coming up. So I am the Mary Schwartz Rose Professor, and why I'm saying that is that the Mary Schwartz Rose started our program in the early 1900s. And whoops, yeah. Okay. How do I get it to advance?
Push here, push here.
Because you cannot see the screen.
No, no, I'm seeing it there. I want it to advance to the next one. Okay, so I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. There we go. So Mary Schwartz Rose in the early 1900s was talking about new vitamins that were discovered and that they were curing diseases that people had no idea how they came to be or how to cure them. Diseases such as scurvy, that is vitamin C deficiency. So I believe if she was around today, she would be talking about exactly what we're talking about today. How do we advance the public discourse on the challenges that we have with the sustainability of our food system, as well as the health conditions that are affecting us. And then Joan Gussow was the first Mary Schwartz Rose professor, and I'm going to talk about her in a second. Whoops, it went forward again. This is Joan, and she taught this course, Nutritional Ecology, for since 1970 about our food system. Okay, so, oh, there we go. That'll be better. Okay, perfect. I don't know how it goes. So we're having a lot of slide advancing issues here. So the sustainability of our food system is important because the food system has the potential to nurture human health and support environmental sustainability. However, it is currently threatening both. So how do we use education and promotion to make this change? And what we do is we want to increase awareness, understanding, and action. So what is increasing awareness? That is, there we go, recognizing the need for sustainable food systems and become inspired to make the change. What is understanding? Knowledge about how sustainable food systems will help the planet and why change is hard. And then action is to have the confidence to be able to drive change. So now I'm going to go through each of these and talk about drivers that will actually make change. So for awareness, the first driver is risk. And this is understanding the negative consequences of the food system. So when we do education, we can talk about these because we have to understand the risks, but know that there is actually something that can be done about it. Because if it's only risk, then people just have a sense of fear and end up turning off. So we have a lot of risks. So these are from the Food and Agriculture Organization, that our food system accounts for more than 1/3 of greenhouse gases. It is leading to deforestation. And then the rest that I'm putting up are in the United States, but I think this is actually things that are happening around the globe. So that we are decreasing our topsoil. This photo basically shows a field that has not been plowed next to a field that has been plowed that is basically 12 to 18 inches lower. And then we are having water scarcity. We are having issues with pesticides, as well as algae blooms that are affecting waterways around the world. So that is our sense of risk. We also have the increasing global famines. And while global famines, thankfully, are down lower than they have been, with the conflict we are having in the world, they are set to be increasing. And this is another Food and Agriculture Organization report just from a few months ago, that we are having threats from our global food system. And the biggest one is the impact on health from metabolic diseases that people are having, which is even bigger than the environmental and social cost that we have. So then the next is to work on having people create values. So values that I care about having a quality of life for themselves as well as for the planet. And I'm going to show this book called Limits to Growth that came out in 1972. Has anybody ever heard of this book? A couple of people, okay. So in this book, one of the first diagrams is this diagram, which I think shows the values, is most people can really only care about their family and today. Yet to think about sustainability of the planet, we have to be thinking about the whole world as well as future generations. And then this is some work that's been done by many researchers on how do we actually create a sense of value within people. And so this is about a moral value. And so the smallest one is concern about ourselves, but then we can add on to that the concern for humanity as well as the concern for the biosphere. And then the next way that we can increase awareness is by driving social norms, that this is just what everyone does to care for the environment. And I think the best way to do this is by creating a sense of caring about food for our youth. So this is showing just many different photos that is having youth care about gardening, cooking, as well as then shopping at farmers markets and supporting local farmers. And then the final way that we can build awareness is to create a sense of identity. And this is that I want to be a part of the change for sustainable food systems. And here's a paper that has been done about how do we actually get people really thinking about food? And there's 3 simple questions. So the questions are on the bottom. What is a food that takes you right back home to get people thinking about cultural and food memories? And then second, what are your food rules, which is how do you make decisions about how you eat? And then the third is how are you learning to care more about food in your life? And that's food for yourself, as well as caring about food for the planet. And so then understanding. And so to build understanding, what we first do is have people see the benefits of making change. And when people can see these benefits, that's when they are actually wanting to change. So that if we switch to more agroecological systems, we are helping the planet. When we are thinking about where we are shopping, we are making changes that can help the planet. The second is recognizing barriers. And these barriers are really real. I'm going to show you a couple of things that are really old. This is actually a comic from the early 1970s. And that is when processed food was just starting to be introduced. And I don't know if you can, I can't actually see it from here, but it's basically a family thanking for all of their processed food products that they are eating. And then the second is a 1980 article by Joan Gussow, who taught the nutritional ecology course, that is about what our corporations are doing with food. Yet these corporations are actually really trying to influence people. This is a company called Monsanto that was based out of the United States, has now been bought by Bayer out of Germany, and just trying to say, let's all talk about food in a way that brings in all of these agro-food systems. And this is a comic, I think we'll share these slides, but basically that she just wants a basic ice cream, and that there's all these other choices that are out there and available that are not about the basic food choices. And then finally is how do we overcome these barriers? And this is an article, and I could certainly share the link for this, that is by someone named Jonathan Latham, that basically is when we understand that the impacts that our current food system is having not only on us, but also on the planet, and we can drive everyone to change, that's how we are going to be able to break down the system. Not that it's going to be easy, but that's how we can do it. And the final is action. And the first thing that we can do is think about personal actions that people can take. And when we can make really simple action plans for people, that is how they can concretely make changes in their lives, that's when change can happen. Then we can have collective action. And this is where we start to see ground up changes in our communities that are making change. So these are just some examples of this that are making big changes in different communities. And then finally is governance. So this is combining those top-down actions for redistribution of resources and wealth with community-based actions. And I think the European Union Farm to Fork strategy is a great way to advance this. So when we can work together to increase awareness, understanding, and actions, and use this through education, that is where we can get everyone thinking about active food system changes and can give us a sense of hope. Because if we lose hope, we have let basically the sides that are pushing for a food system that is affecting our planet and is affecting our health have the upper hand. And so finally, I think I'll end with this quote from Margaret Mead, which is, "Never doubt a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam, for your presentation and for your speech. Okay, I give immediately the floor to Tania Schusler. Tania is a professor in the Loyola University of Chicago, and she's an expert in social and environmental justice.
Okay, great. Okay, buongiorno, thank you. So I'm speaking on community engagement, and when I say community, I'm referring to either a geographic area, where people share the same place, or a community defined by an aspect of identity, such as a racial or ethnic group or immigration status. And we know that our dominant food system is unsustainable. It exploits nature, it exploits workers, and it also is vulnerable. Vulnerable to shocks such as the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm going to talk in the United States context because that's where I'm based, and you can let me know how that compares with your own. In the United States, during the pandemic, we saw a dramatic increase in the need for emergency food assistance at the same time that producers had excess product due to closures in their markets, schools, restaurants, etc. So a disconnect there. And in my city in Chicago, prior to pandemic, we had disparities in food insecurity. So you see in the left-hand map, different neighborhoods in the Chicago region. And we have greater rates of food insecurity in Latine and African-American neighborhoods. And during the pandemic, food insecurity rose across all racial ethnic groups, but more so in those communities that already experienced higher food insecurity rates. So a definite issue here in terms of inequities. And the government responded, providing food assistance, but didn't always reach the most vulnerable communities, such as undocumented immigrants, elders, veterans, people with disabilities. And there was an important role that community-based organizations played to help get food to people needing it. And you can distribute food from the dominant food system where the profit from that food production is going predominantly to support commodity crops, to support the handful of larger corporations that control the food system. Or you can distribute food in ways that work to reorganize that system to something more sustainable and more equitable. So in research that I did with colleagues at Loyola, where we sought to learn from the experiences of local community-based organizations that were helping to respond to the crises created during the pandemic, we found that they were working to distribute food to people in need, but to do that in ways that connected with local food production, both urban farms and also rural farms in the periphery of Chicago, and to support small-scale farms and to support Black, Brown, and Indigenous-owned and operated farms to reconnect people to the land, to develop and expand upon farmers markets, mobile markets, pop-up markets, small business incubation, to use this as an opportunity to generate enterprise and wealth within local communities, and to provide training and education for people in terms of nutrition, in terms of growing their own food, but also workforce training to develop skills within communities that have been marginalized within the US economy to help, again, create employment and economic opportunities. So this illustrates an emphasis on responding to the crisis, but in a way that is based upon a vision for the future of a more sustainable food system, a more equitable food system, and one that's resilient to future shocks. In our research, we observed that these organizations were able to fill an important role because of their embeddedness. This is a concept that comes from sociology. The social relationships of these organizations with the people within the communities where they worked created conditions enabling them to do a variety of things I'm highlighting two here. They drew upon the local knowledge of the people with whom they worked to creatively solve problems and built upon the community's culture and assets. So this is different from a government response that's providing food, but that food may be very disconnected from the cultural preferences of the people receiving it. And so here, instead of a kind of top-down, externally prescribed approach, the organizations were really valuing the local knowledge and expertise and cultures where they worked. And they also integrated food across a range of issues. So not just making sure people had food to eat and that that food was nutritious, but connecting with facets like mental health, economic opportunity, building community relationships, sense of community and capacity. And again, these, oh, sorry, getting ahead of myself. One of the key ways in which these organizations did so was in collaboration. Many of these organizations were small, and so they partnered with others as well. And as a representative said, this is not, just partnership, it's really about building relationships. And they recommended to build those partnerships required recognizing shared values between the different partners, valuing local expertise, continued communication to identify clear roles and responsibilities of different individuals and organizations involved, sharing resources, including funding equitably across different groups, and being transparent and accountable. So in my context, there's a lot of distrust within communities that have been marginalized within society, and so repairing that distrust through an intentional relationship building effort to create trust over time. And so those organizations were embedded within their communities, which may be true for from some of you who are based within the community where you're working, or you may be a museum that's based external to the communities, but wanting to be more engaged with local communities, as in the case of the Field Museum. The Field Museum offers an example through their Roots and Routes initiative, which focused on engaging with 3 local communities near the Burnham Wildlife Corridor, when there was a large ecological restoration of this site. The Field Museum collaborated with local organizations that were already embedded within the African American, Chinese American, and Mexican American communities nearby. So social service agencies, arts-based organizations. The Field Museum worked with those organizations that were already trusted by local community members to engage people in planning for this ecological restoration, so that not only would it benefit the environment, but that people would be comfortable coming to and using that space. And in any community, it's not a homogeneous group. There are many different groups of people with different interests, and one of those is youth. I highlight here the Food Project, which is based in Boston, Massachusetts, because it's an effort that has involved youth in urban agriculture that's been replicated in many cities around the United States, including in Chicago. And the approach that they take to youth participation is one that is described as a partnership between adults and youth, where adults create opportunities for youth to engage in challenging action, fulfilling genuine needs within a community. And this is characterized by shared decision-making. So typically adults are in power, we have control, and so we need to think about how we share that decision-making power with young people, and that's going to vary along a continuum depending upon the context, the age, the developmental stage of the youth. And there are different practices that one can use, drawing upon positive youth development, for example, or critical youth empowerment. And I'm happy to talk more about some of those specific practices through the day. But as one works with youth to involve them in genuine action to improve their communities, we have seen evidence that this can not only contribute to positive environmental and social change within local communities, it also helps young people to develop their capacities as citizens and change agents to contribute to longer-term social change for more sustainable communities. So I look forward to the opportunity to talk more with all of you. I know there are many people in this room who have experience with youth participation and with community engagement to explore this further throughout the day. Thank you.
Professor in the University is a professor in the University of Pavia. She's also the coordinator of one of the spoke inside the National Biodiversity Future Center, the spoke 6, if I remember well,
Yes.
that is focused on health and biodiversity. And she's an expert on food and biodiversity too. So, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. Thank you. So I'm going to drive now. Okay. So here we are. Okay. So I'm supposed to talk to you and discuss a little bit on the focus of the synergies between nutrition and, of course, food, but also health and environment. So my disclosure, I'm a medical doctor, so I'm a little bit more into health, but I've been trained into food and nutrition. So it's a pleasure to be here in this fantastic integration of different skills and background, and to come up with something that will make, a complex system, which is how we try to give back something for the planetary health, and as you said before, for the future generations. So what we are, assisting in today, I'm trying not to be too late, so is an epidemiological transition. And this epidemiological transition is very important also for food, because we are dealing with new problems that we have to tackle. And first of all is the population aging. In Italy, for example, this is a big issue. And we have very low rate of new infants and a low level of people getting old. And this has to do with food, yes, very much, not only for the food access, but also for all the issues, the clinical issues that make the non-communicable diseases a big problem, and non-communicable diseases that will affect and impact, of course, medical services and public health. And because of this, and because of the real changing world, and because of all the new things that are happening, we are also living this nutrition transition, which helps or does not help the behaviors that we should really have towards diet, for example, and therefore all the risk factors that are linked to this. And what are the risk factors? Well, the risk factors are all the risk factors that make us aware of the increasing levels of non-communicable diseases, as I said before, which are a mortality risk for the 75% of the population of the whole world, which means everywhere, not only in developed countries, but also in developing ones. We have been trying to combat undernutrition, and now we find ourselves trying to combat overnutrition and obesity and diabetes type 2, even in places like Africa or Tanzania, where I worked with Nunzia before. And this mainly because somehow we are responsible of these changes. We are living in this Anthropocenic era where the human causes and is causing climate change. Part of the climate change, not all of it, but part of the climate change is because of us. And part of the main reason we are impacting so much with the CO2 emissions is because of our food system. So the food system itself has to be changed, because the planet existed before us and will keep probably existing even if we disappear, but we are not able to live without the planet. So this is why we are changing the paradigm and not thinking anymore of with an anthropocentric view, but trying, to think with an anthropocenic view, which means one health approach, where the ecosystem needs to be in balance. And one of the drivers of the balance of the ecosystem is biodiversity. So we have always tried to change things, increasing research, increasing fundamental research, increasing healthcare system, increasing education. And as me as a medical doctor, I mean, I really think that these are all important things, but probably there is something else that I was missing. For example, enhancing biodiversity, which is one of the ways that we can counteract, for example, climate change. And this is because we are living, and I think by, I can see the smiles of my colleagues, we are living this pandemic situation where three pandemics all together work together in this new concept of the syndemic situation we're living, which means that we are going through a big problem, which is called obesity, but we have also undernutrition problem, which doesn't mean that we don't have enough food, but we don't have enough food of quality. So nutritious food. So people may also seem, in a right weight, but this doesn't mean that they are fulfilling all the requirements of micronutrients, for example, that are important in order not to get sick of those non-communicable diseases we were talking about. And we are also living climate change, which impacts indirectly, but also directly to our health. It is supposed that people who are adolescents now, because of the climate change, will live less. Because of obesity, we will be the first ones who probably will be able to live less than our fathers. And this is something that never happened before. And so it is really time that we should act all together, trying to understand that if we have to do something, probably we will have also to try to balance all the ecosystem. And this is not easy, but maybe something that with education and awareness, rising awareness in everybody, any one of us can do. For example, in Italy, last year, biodiversity has become part of our constitution. So this is the first time that happened, and it's not only the right of the future generations to have biodiversity. So we don't only need to conserve biodiversity, but we also need to restore it. And this is somehow also our responsibility, because biodiversity loss causes a lot of problems. And of course, this impacts at the end of the chain, the human well-being. And there are really many ways. So I guess that you all know how, but for example, by microbial biodiversity, which has to be rich, but when even in our gut, our microbiota has to be diverse in order to function well with us. But when this doesn't happen, then we get sick, and also the land gets sick. The food also is affected by this loss of microbial biodiversity, which is part of the One Health approach, and water quality, and not only, but also agricultural biodiversity. And we know that the intensive kind of agriculture that we do have now, because we have to sustain so many peoples, and 2 more billions in the next years, is not going to help with food quality. So we might eat enough, but not well enough. And we might even over-exceed thanks to all these ultra-processed foods that cost less and taste better. But this doesn't mean that we are getting nutritious food. And this, of course, impacts with all the other problems about health outcomes we have talked about. Coming also to biomedical and pharmaceutical discovery, because I would like to remind you that 20% of the drugs used in modern medicine and those 75% of the anti-cancer drugs become from natural resources. So when we talked about also economical value, we should probably try to enhance and make people awareness of the new jobs, but also the new opportunities. Because I'm ashamed to say it, but if we deliver the new opportunities as money opportunities, probably we will have more funds to do things all together, and to have also the government and the policymakers to come closer. So we really do need to do something also to save this. 15 millions of deaths attributed to non-communicable diseases, which are called premature deaths. And why premature? Because they shouldn't be there. I mean, they hit people who are young, between 30 and 69 years of age. I mean, this in a civilized world like ours, especially in developing and developed countries, shouldn't be there. But we are not able to do something. And what is this something? Well, sometimes the something is not really, it doesn't look like very, big thing, like diet. You would say, well, diet, does this make, is diet really able to make all this, burden? Yes, it is, because diets, as you can see in this slide, are at a top risk factor for disease and health. So it is a problem which seems very small, but it's very big because it's wide, and nutrition impacts all these systems, this triad. So immune system, both during development in fetal life, and then when you are adult in response. I mean, we all live the COVID problem, okay? The first cause of the severity of the COVID was age. People, old, and we have an aging problem in Europe and in developing countries and in Italy, first of all. The second problem and the second risk factor of severity of COVID, you know what it was? Obesity. So again, the syndemic we were talking about, and all had to do with the immune system response, which was not adequate. So we do have to think that the importance of the whole system and to get to the planetary health thing needs to be tackled because of human health, and needs to be tackled from different, from different sides in an integrated view, because I really think that when we do have a complex problem, like in mathematicians teach us, we need to understand it and then to solve it by connections. So this is the value of the today meeting, trying to connect us all with different backgrounds, but wanting to reach the same objective. So I will stop here. I have many other slides, but I don't want to be the only one here. So it's your turn now. Okay.
And you can use it.
Just need to get the next.
Okay. Ah, yes, for that. You have a look here.
So it's this one, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Play from the start. Oh, it went back. Doesn't matter. Okay. Thank you very much to Nunzia and the very big team, clearly, of everyone who has worked very hard to bring this meeting together today. I'm really privileged to be here. I know it took a lot of determination to get everybody here against all sorts of adverse weather conditions, so congratulations. Yes, so determination goes a long way. So I would like to just kick off. What I'm going to say will link in with everything, and I've already learned a lot from all of you, so thank you for that. But I thought I would just kick off with this quote from Rachel Carson, who I'm sure is well known to Pam in particular, from 1962. The biologist wrote, "It was a spring without voices. On the mornings that had once throbbed with the dawn chorus of robins, catbirds, doves, jays, wrens, and scores of other bird voices, there was now no sound, only silence, lay over the fields and woods and marsh. She was referring, of course, to the impact back then of pesticides, and this work, The Silent Spring, contributed towards banning of DDT in the US for most uses since around 1972. But this text also heralds in a whole series of texts in the history of sustainable development more broadly. Here's a selection. We've already had one mentioned earlier, the limits to growth. So the synergies are already forming. But I would say that common to all of these texts is indeed this theme of limits to growth. And this is, as has already been pointed out, an ecological problem, an environmental problem, but it's also a moral issue as well. And this definition of sustainable development, I thought it was worth putting up. I'm sure you've heard it before by Brundtland, but this is the definition, as I understand it, that is still being used today. And again, this brings in this theme of us protecting the planet, not only for our own needs, but for the future generation, which is indeed, in many ways, the most important thing to think about. So this is the problem that we have been posed today, and this is what I've been asked to speak about in particular, is the role of museums and cultural institutions. And so the question is, how, in what ways are we going to go about this? I have given a little handout, thank you very much for those who printed out in Italian, of the definition of museum, because I don't have time to talk about the definition of the museum, nor do I have interest. But in 2022, the ICOM definition of a museum was updated at length. And two of the things I'd like to highlight from that then are sustainability and the role of participation of communities. So this looks obvious to everybody here, but this was a breakthrough for the International Council of Museums in the sense that traditionally museums have been associated more with preservation, conservation, collection research. And so there has been what you could call a social turn in museology in the present day. So in what follows, simply I'll follow three paths. One is to think about greening the museum, so to speak. Another is to move in more closely to think about community museums and eco-museums. And then just as one case study, I'd like to talk a little bit more at depth about some work we've been collaborating in Costa Rica. So one of the most obvious ways that museums have traditionally engaged with the environment and with biodiversity is greening the museum. This is the Quai Branly that many of you will have visited, designed by Jean Nouvel. And this is a trend that you can see in a lot of places. I saw it yesterday in Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, in fact, where green walls have become one way in which museums are demonstrably engaging with environmental diversity. More proactively then, we have examples. For example, this is quite a recent initiative at the London Natural History Museum, which is an urban nature project, which will be familiar to many people living in cities. Here, not only greening the outdoor space with biodiversity, but creating a public engagement program to involve them with education and also get active in the urban nature project. This is also happening in Scotland. This is our National Collection Centre, which is just outside the city of Edinburgh, where again, the green space is being used in a biodiversity project, but local communities are getting involved in this work. And there's an officer dedicated to this particular programme. This has already been mentioned, the Field Museum in Chicago. It's quite a nice slide of their edible museum. So there are some benefits. You don't just work, you get to eat, which is always a bonus. But then what happens when this city museum scale comes down to a smaller scale? And this is a photograph I took on your left quite recently on an island off the west coast of Scotland, an inner isle called Lismore, where this cultural centre, it's a Gaelic and Heritage Centre, won an award back in 2007 because it was the first place to put a grass roof on their museum. So this was really, it won an award for innovation. It had biofuel powering the museum. But as you can see, within a couple of decades, it's really hard to maintain because you get a grant, you win an award, but how do you maintain it? And also is quite an early stage project. And so it actually physically wasn't sustainable. The soil that was put on the roof was too shallow. The grass didn't take. And what they're doing at the moment is they've got little sods of peat upside down, and they're putting sedum seeds into it to regrow this roof. Solar power is another thing where small museums have received funding to help with them greening their spaces. But again, when you're working at this scale, it's really hard to maintain wind power and other forms of economical energy. So this just then brings me to community museums and ecomuseums as a next point. This is what I spend a lot of my research doing. I'm based over in the east coast of Scotland, near Edinburgh, in a place called St Andrews, which is a medieval town, but most of my research is over on the west, mainly on the islands. And we've done quite a lot of community heritage projects and workshops and interviews and focus groups and all sorts of things about what the local communities are wanting and needing at the moment. And one of the main things, in fact, was a network to empower themselves. But up on Orkney in the north of Scotland, this is quite a nice quotation by the education officer that might answer in very simple terms, what can museums do? And so she said that museums and other heritage organisations can improve public education, training, awareness, participation and access to information on climate change. And her own initiative, which is lovely, was a snorkel safari. So this actually, like many of the things I'll show, happened during COVID as well. One of the things you could do was get outdoors. You could actually be with people if you were snorkeling. You weren't breathing on them, I guess. And so they engaged in what's well known as citizen science, collecting data on underwater seaweed, which, as you're aware, is an important carbon sink. So this is an example of a museum partnering with an existing climate science action. It doesn't have to be a partnership with an existing climate science action or even with scientists. Ecomuseums, I can't speak to ecomuseums because Italy is the place extraordinaire for ecomuseums, and some people here work in them and know an awful lot more than I do. But the main one in Scotland, the oldest one in Scotland, is up in Skye. It's highly successful, and this is just a couple of slides from there and examples initiated by them. In one case, path restoration with a local group, and then of course working with local schools in education, starting from a young age. They work most closely with the primary school in that context. When the weather's awful, then the primary school group quite often go here because they're more sheltered by the gorse. This is Loch Shianta, and I just wanted to show this example because it brings us a wee bit more towards the idea of traditional ecological knowledge. So not just planting things and doing new things, but actually engaging with traditional and more ancient or native knowledge. This is the interpretation panel from the Ecomuseum that used to be there. It's not actually there anymore. Maybe the secret got out and they had too many visitors, but this is showing the medicinal properties of that particular loch that you can swim in, and which I can guarantee is absolutely freezing. So this then is engaging, as I said, with traditional knowledge, in this case, the healing properties of the water, and research around this could look, for example, at medicines of the Highlands and Islands. This traditional exchange between older people and younger people, of course, isn't just about biodiversity. We've done a lot around storytelling, language, music as well. And beyond Scotland then, at the moment, we're running a project called Shared Island Stories between Scotland and the Caribbean. This is Holly Bino, who's a curator and a PhD student. So she's conducting her research on Skye, but also in her home island of Bequia in the Caribbean. And in this case, she is planting a community and medicinal garden in her small island around a community hub in collaboration with local people. This is known locally as bush medicine revival around the Caribbean. It's engaging native plants, but also knowledge brought over from Africa during the transatlantic slave trade. It's just a really nice drawing as well. Beyond the Caribbean then, some other work we've been doing has been EULAC Museum, some of you may have heard of from a few years ago, out in Peru. Not in this instance working with medicinal garden, but in this case running workshops on local biodiversity and agriculture, and on the bottom then chicha making, which is a big part of their tradition, with local groups as well. And just very quickly, another project led by my colleague is about fishing and farming in the desert, which ended up in a school in a little exhibition in a school in the desert. But of course, you can't have food security without water security. And one of the good things that came out of EULAC Museum project was an exchange between the Coronga water judges in Peru, in the northwest coast of Peru, and the water judges in Valencia. So this is traditional ways, all run by men, I have to point out, of governing what happens to water and the distribution of water. And so this is something, you know, thinking about how that has happened in the past, and indeed how those decisions are being made in the present. And finally, I would like to say just a few words about the final case study of Costa Rica, because we've worked with them for a very long time now. And this runs from 2015 right through to almost the present day, right through COVID. These are community museums in the Latin American sense of the word. There's a definition on the handout. On the left, we have Boruca, and on the right, Reykjavik. They're very close to each other. And these would be indigenous community museums in this case. Throughout the different projects that we've collaborated with them have all been about intergenerational transmission of knowledge. We ran a youth exchange between there and, again, Skye in Scotland, where young people exchanged on their traditions. We also helped to facilitate intergenerational carving workshops, you can see with the master carver there and the local school group. But the story here is that twice now they've had major flooding. Flooding's very, very pertinent today, given yesterday's catastrophes. But they had major flooding on 2 occasions, and we were able, this then coincided with COVID coming in, we were able to get Global Challenges funding and respond to this just through the relationship built with this community on what they wanted to do. And if you see here, this is the local school, and the community museum, the little beautiful little hut that you saw a minute ago, is just here on the bottom. So it was full right up to the top. So in fact, what they wanted to do was in the space between the museum and the school was to create a community garden. And again, this was to eat, because they had to close their borders, mainly as an indigenous group. They didn't want foreigners coming in during COVID. They had to make themselves sustainable. So they grew food to eat, but also then reenacting medicinal plants according to their native knowledge, which were then planted out in this lovely spiral shape, and communicating this again with the school groups. And so there's a short video that's not going to play just now. There isn't time now, but there's a website and you can all refer to it later if you wish. So that's basically me done. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all this presentation. We are perfectly in time, because with this last presentation, we can consider the first part of the symposium concluded. So I think not to take any question, but if someone wants to add something, I think that we can, because we have a coffee break now. So maybe my idea was that we can try to talk much more each other during the coffee break. But if someone, and then during the tables again and during the coffee break. So I didn't think that is essential now to make questions, but if someone need, because things that have to leave the events before, please, we have just a few minutes, but 3 minutes, not more, because we also prepared a video from our colleagues from Tanzania that is working for this project, but we decided not to show him it because we don't have time enough. So we prefer that people have the opportunity to talk each other during the coffee break and then during the round table. Do you want to add something? There is someone that wanted to ask him, or we can move all together, please, because the buildings are under renovation and it is easier than usual to get lost. So please move all together. Okay. Thank you very much again. Thank you to everyone. Okay. No. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. Just one thing, please. We are moving at the first floor of the building number 7, and the round table are in 2 other rooms. So take with you all your things because we need to move, ok? Ok, per chi, ragazzi, allora ho soltanto detto di portare tutte le cose con voi perché noi ci muoviamo in altre 2 stanze per le tavole rotonde, quindi lasciamo quest'aula. No, giù.